20 minutes, more or less, for questions. And there indeed are questions. And we begin with a question from Kate Novak, which is, what role do you think journalists and public intellectuals should play in conveying the sense of urgency and emotional impact of mass-scale catastrophic events, since emotional journalism is often equated with manipulative gutter press journalism, and emotions are not seen as a valuable facet of public critique?
You're muted.
Good. That's an important question. Thank you. Thank you for that. You can't avoid having some form of emotion in communication. It's always there, or it's absent. I mean, the emotions are part of the meaning of information, and the problem is that we lack an understanding, an appreciation of the large scale crises that are so devastating to the world. And if we convey it in a dry, unemotional way, it will lack meaning. So I think that, and if you show the face of individuals who are affected, I mean, they are affected. The problem is, if you don't show them, they are invisible, and you don't, and they may as well not exist, and the problem may not as well exist, out of sight, out of mind. So I think journalists have a responsibility, if their editors permit, to humanize or for other species to speciesize the reality that they're writing about in large scale.
I would jump in and say that the danger of not humanizing these experiences, and even when we're talking about other species, we need to humanize them in order to make their experience of the other species experience of the world salient for human audiences. We're attempting to write from a human perspective in order to make our own audiences attend to these subjects and have some kind of empathy for these other phenomena. My complaint about the world scientists' warning to humanity is that these warnings are extremely dry. They're short, but they're filled with jargon and with data, and they don't move the audience at all. So I think the scientists were worried about risking or undermining their own authority by stooping to the level of emotion, because they had exactly the fear that this question raises, that somehow they would be undermining their seriousness as scientists if they wrote emotionally on these subjects. And yet I think the importance of conveying poignancy overrides the need to maintain a kind of detachment and formal authority. And I would say also, by working multidimensionally, by offering the broader context and the more sort of sober analytical representation of the phenomenon, and then moving into another mode, another dimension, where they write in this more emotional vein, I think there's a way of avoiding the sense that one is merely gushing emotionally about a subject and is not thinking analytically. We can combine both perspectives or multiple perspectives in a single piece of communication.
Let me just add briefly to that. We're talking about making information experiential rather than purely analytic and technical. So, for example, when the scientists make a projection of so many centimeters of sea level rise over a period of time, that means very little to us. But if you could show what that means for what a part of the coastline that we're familiar with and we're connected with will look like with that level of sea level rise, that creates an experiential knowledge that is more meaningful and can be very powerful.
Thank you so much. Here's another question from Anna Heino. Does proximity to the event also impact the reaction to a disastrous event? The closer you are, the more affected you are emotionally.
Absolutely. Again, the part of our brain that responds to individuals. I mean, this was evolved, when we lived in caves, and we only experienced people up close and personal because we didn't have the global scale, ability to communicate that we have now, and so forth. So we survived by being very sensitive to what was happening right in front of our eyes, but in today's world, we also have to appreciate and react and deal with things that are at a distance. But that's where we have to kind of overcome the tendency of our brain to prefer things that are close than distant, and think more carefully, more slowly about the reality of things that are happening at a distance.
In the environmental context, I would say that we've developed the technologies to create vast, faraway crises that are relevant to our own ability to survive on this planet. And yet our psychological capacities have evolved much more slowly than our technologies. So as Paul is saying here, we have this minds that are very similar to those of our ancestors, who really only needed to respond to proximate or nearby threats. And yet, because of technology, and even because of communication technology that brings information to us about humanitarian situations in distant parts of the world, we have that information, and yet we don't quite have the minds that we need, the mental capacities that enable us necessarily to respond with appropriate sensitivity to these very serious crises. This is what Nixon is writing about in Slow Violence and the Environmentalism of the Poor, that these phenomena that we really ought to be attending to, such as climate change and extinction, are occurring far away and on a scale and at a pace, at a speed that we can scarcely apprehend with our sensory abilities and our mental abilities. Thus, we need artificially, through language, to intensify our focus on these phenomena. And this is the role of communicators, writer activists, journalists, and scholar activists, I would say, to help us pay attention to what we need to be attending to.
Okay, thank you so much. The next question is from Dorota Kochanowicz, and it is, when we speak of big numbers, isn't the psychic numbing also an effect of the social expectation that situations on a large scale must be dealt by states and institutions?
Well, this, to a certain extent, this is something that needs to be dealt with at the larger level, but the individual has a role as well, both in supporting, showing support for the leadership of our states and institutions, and also by actions that if enough people are doing these things, will scale up and make a difference. So people need to appreciate the fact that just because they can't do everything themselves doesn't mean that they're not effective. And one of the ways of being effective is to support organizations and institutions that are actually effective through the power of numbers and the fact that they can gather funding, and they work together as an organization to create change, often at the level of the governments. And so you can support those organizations by donating to them, by becoming a member, by participating in events that they put on where they need participation. There are many ways that you can amplify your own individual effectiveness through working with groups and organizations. So that is one way that you can overcome the numbing and the false sense of an efficacy.
And very, very quickly, let me just say that I at the end of my talk, I rapidly moved through some slides related to uh, offering personal testimony and writing letters. With my students in writing classes, I often will ask them to write some letters, practice writing letters on issues that they're concerned about to different audiences, because you change your voice depending on which audience you're approaching. My thinking is that one of the ways, especially in representative democracies, that we can amplify our own impact, our own power, is by writing letters to officials, from corporate officials to government officials, even university officials, especially for students, and understanding that using some of these concepts in expressing ourselves through letter writing might be a way of achieving this impact that we fear that we can't have if we just act as individuals. And I think even in societies which aren't exactly representative democracies, such as China, there are ways for people to communicate with local or regional government officials and say, these are things that I'm concerned about, often writing in a more, not in an adversarial way, but sometimes in a patriotic way. We have such a wonderful city. Wouldn't it be a great thing if we didn't cut down all of the trees next to the streets? There's a way of calibrating your voice and writing about your own personal experience that will be moving to government officials so that they might pay attention to issues that you yourself find important. The book Numbers and Nerves, by the way, is about to appear in Chinese translation. So it'll be interesting to see how some of these ideas have an effect or don't have an effect with that kind of audience.
Thank you. Congratulations on the Chinese edition of the book. We only have time for 2 more questions, and the next one is from Katarzyna Majkowska, and it's pseudo inefficacy experiment. What are the statistics? Because I would for sure find the big number statistics leaflet calling for help more persuasive rationally, and the child more persuasive emotionally, but both persuasive enough. Are there many of such respondents?
I don't know the distribution of people who are more thoughtful, as you obviously are, and those who just react with their feelings. I would have to go dig deeply into the data to try to answer that. But one of the problems with the way our minds work, as I all too briefly tried to express, was that our brain lets negative information that's kind of dampens our enthusiasm. It lets it in, even if it's irrelevant. So the bad feelings from those irrelevant pictures come in and reduce the good feeling that you have about doing something good for someone. This is a vestige of when we lived in caves, where if you heard something, you got information from a sound in the bush or something that sounded threatening, you didn't stop to debate what it was. You just took it as it was and got out of there fast, and hopefully survived to evolve continually. So the brain has no gatekeeper for feelings. If I give you an argument why you should help someone or something, you may think of a counter argument. Well, can I be sure that this will make any difference, and it'll be delivered effectively, and so forth. If information conveys a feeling, an emotion, the brain doesn't critique it. It lets it in just in case you need it to survive. And so and that's very effective in some cases, but it also messes us up. So we have to be aware of that and recognize that we should not be demotivated from doing what we can do just because we can't do everything.
Thanks so much. And we only have time for one more question, and it is again from Kate Novak, and it is for Professor Scott Slovic. Are there any dangers to the technique that Amy Donovan is using? I'm thinking that it might promote anthropocentric understanding of the world.
Yeah, I think my perspective is that there's no way we can avoid anthropocentric understanding of the world. That even when we try to be biocentric or geocentric, as some people put it, our very desire to avoid anthropocentrism comes from an anthropocentric perspective. So I think there's no way to avoid some degree of anthropocentrism, but we can achieve at least a limited, tempered version of anthropocentrism. There's extreme anthropocentrism, and there's more moderated, or what I would call limited anthropocentrism. I think that's what Donovan is doing. And she's very self-conscious of her techniques. Each of the different sections of her essay experiments, kind of probes a different angle of perspective, which suggests that she's testing the effectiveness of these various techniques individually and in tandem with each other, in order to suggest that we need to make an effort to try to speculate about the experience of another species. I don't think she presumes to know with any degree of certainty, what a whale might be experiencing when there's tremendous pounding and other kinds of noises and wires and other mechanisms in the ocean as a result of oil prospecting. So she's speculating about what this experience might mean to whales. So I agree that there is a strong element of anthropocentrism in Donovan's approach, but remember, she's writing for human readers, and she's attempting to translate what a whale may be experiencing into a format that her human readers will be able to digest and apprehend. And I find her work to be compelling and to have potential in that way. But I certainly don't think she's avoiding anthropocentrism in any kind of absolute way.
Okay, so just as a follow-up, since that question concerned aesthetic techniques, so there's one question from Marta Rusnak, and it is: commemorating the sites of catastrophes or mass murders, experts must face the task of showing scale, but also individual experience. Are museums an effective medium of social communication in the 21st century?
Having participated in an extensive effort by a museum to create exhibits that help people understand risk, people of all ages, appeal to people of all ages. I can attest to the fact that if it's done carefully, that museums can be very effective ways of educating people about rather complex topics and making things experiential. They can create displays where it puts you in a situation that is very educational and things like that. So absolutely, they have an important role to play, as do schools. We need also to think about teaching young children from an early age to think about risk and about relating to other people at a distance and at large scale. As well. That's a whole other effort that maybe a topic for another day. So very good question. Thank you.
And I would say that the cover of this book is from such a display. These are 888,216 red ceramic poppies in the moat near the Tower of London in the UK, commemorating Commonwealth soldiers who were killed in World War I. So this is an example of not a museum exactly, but a type of public demonstration that attempts to raise awareness of the implications of all the casualties of World War I. And this photo was taken by Kenneth Helfand, a landscape architect who has an article in the book Numbers and Nerves, focusing actually on museums, such as Holocaust museums and other public displays of information about mass atrocities. So he attempts to give examples and explain how these displays function as a way of raising public awareness of these events.
Okay, and just really final question. It's a short one, and it's to Paul. from Alik Ismail Zadeh, and it's, did you perform such sociological surveys within the groups of people who donated to one instead of more to learn the reasons of doing so?
Yes, yes. We know a lot about individual characteristics that make people more or less willing to donate to others. And so I think there needs to be more work like this. But certainly within our samples, we try to identify these kinds of individual difference characteristics. So there is information about that, but we need to learn more about which people donate and how to motivate people.